All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's Mark Barchi, the voice of the Mustangs, here along with Neil Fisher from the Apopka Chief. And we are happy to be with you for the first time in probably 4 months since we've given you our last update. And it was not for want of being back with you again. We certainly would like to have given you more, but we didn't have information to give. And we didn't want to go live if we didn't actually have anything to say. So we are pleased to finally have an opportunity to share some information with you. It is still admittedly incomplete. There are still some gaps in it. That we are still in kind of a fluid situation, and it is still very much subject to change. But for the first time in the 2020-21 school year, we feel like we actually have at least kind of a blueprint or a roadmap of what to expect. So Neil is here with me to kind of take you through that and react to what we know and to get some information kind of out there, and then when we expect to know more. So I want to start by reviewing the school year in general before we get to athletics specifically. And let me go ahead and put that up now. So here is what we know. What is already in progress is conditioning. And for those who are not as familiar with the parlance of high school athletics, when we say conditioning, we are talking about we're talking about workouts that are generic in nature and do not truly emulate the conditions of an actual competition. So for right now, football and swimming are the two sports that are doing this, and we anticipate that some of our other fall sports are going to start doing this, and we'll share updates about those as soon as we know them, because that's something that is allowed under both FHSAA and Orange County Public Schools policy. And it is something that we can do safely because since we're not trying to actually simulate a game competition, we can do weight training, we can do cardiovascular training. I've seen, if you've watched the Twitter feed or the Facebook feed of the Wekiva swimming team, you've seen them out there on picnic tables, kind of planking, if you will, on every other bench, spaced out more than 6 feet, and doing some exercises with their legs to build up that muscle, and it's useful for performing the sport, but it's not actually practice for the sport. And that happens before tryouts, so you don't have to be an accepted member of the team in order to participate in something like that. So that's happening now. And the reason I wanted to point that out is because that still requires athletic clearances. And we have had a change to the way athletic clearances work this year. If you haven't already followed it on our Facebook or Twitter pages or on our website, wekivamustangs.com. And that is that all athletic clearances are now done electronically. There's no longer a need for you to bring anything to the front office or to the athletic trainer. Now, the truth is we were planning on doing that anyway without regard to the pandemic, but now it makes it even such a better idea that we don't need to exchange those kinds of documents in person anymore. So those are all done. You get the link on our website, wekivamustangs.com. There's only one form that you actually have to download, print out, take to a medical professional, get a wet signature on it, and then upload it again by scanning it back into your computer. And that is the actual EL2 physical form. All of the other paperwork is strictly online. There is an opportunity for you to upload your certificates from your FHSAA required videos about concussions and cardiac arrests and heat illness awareness. And then all of the other forms you can sign electronically. You don't actually need to print them out and then upload them again. So that's a great enhancement and makes the whole process quite a bit easier. Our head athletic trainer, Coach Hippolyte, is reviewing those as they are submitted, and she is approving them, assuming they are complete and ready to go. And if there's anything wrong with it, then she will send it back with notes on what needs to be revised, because those are still important for you to be able to participate in conditioning. And once we are ready to start with tryouts and practices and competitions, then that will already be checked off, and and you'll be ready to go without having to wait for any of that information to come back. So again, go to wekivamustangs.com or check out the links on our social media feeds. We have all of the instructions for how to do that, and then we have the link to the actual system where you can submit that information. So then we have the actual start of school. So August 10th is the first day of school, and you may be saying to yourself, wait a minute, I thought we changed it to August 21st. And well, we did. And now we've changed it back with the caveat that August 10th will be virtual options only. So even if you indicated on the survey that you are interested in a brick and mortar in-person experience, you will still be defaulted into the launch at home option starting August 10th. And then we will reevaluate the opportunity to do brick and mortar at a later point. The benefit of keeping the August 10th start date, first of all, for employees of Orange County Public Schools, including your teachers, that's great news because that means that they get to go back to work on time and they get paid on time, instead of having to worry about what would potentially happen if we moved the whole school year back, or maybe even shortened it, which has a lot of domino effects that are not particularly pleasant. And the other benefit to that is then we don't have to deal with what to do with the lost days. The state of Florida has already expressed some flexibility on that if you don't get to 180 days this year, it's okay. But we don't have to worry about the first semester being shorter than the second semester, or do we take away some hurricane days, or how do we deal with the fact that we lost almost 2 weeks of school? We don't have to deal with that now because those instructional days are back on the calendar. So that's great news for those reasons. Then August 21st, which is the date that we had tentatively said was going to be the start of school, is now the earliest possible return to in-person classroom instruction for those who selected that option. And Orange County has requested a waiver from the state of Florida and the Department of Education to have additional autonomy in this area, that if the school board determines that it still is not safe based on the latest medical data, that they would have the flexibility to push this date back further, even past the end of August, if they felt it was necessary. Now, that is still pending, and we don't know if that waiver would be granted, or even if it is granted, whether the school board would feel that it's necessary to move that date further. But what we do know is that August 21st is the earliest it could be. Then we deal with athletics specifically. So originally, the FHSAA met earlier this month and determined that they were not going to make any changes to the fall sports calendar at the state level, and instead they would defer to local school districts and private schools as needed to make those decisions at the local level. And Orange County, almost immediately after that meeting was over, sent out a message to the athletic directors and said that they would be postponing the start of the fall sports season until further notice based on the unique conditions in Orange County. Then later on that week, the FHSAA Board of Directors met again, and they determined that it would be most appropriate, even at the state level, to go ahead and push the start of the fall sports season to no sooner than August 24th. Now, that is not a promise that fall sports will start on August 24th. That is simply the earliest that they could start for anywhere in the state. That overrules any counties that might have wanted to start today, which today was originally supposed to be the start of that. Now, you may be wondering, like, that's still, like, today even would have seemed early for us to start fall sports. And that's because we're not truly talking about the start of competitions. We're talking about tryouts and practices. So you have to add 2 weeks to that, because there is a mandatory 2-week period that we refer to as acclimatization. And that is what allows athletes to practice in a true simulation of competition and get their bodies safely ready to play at the level of intensity that is demanded of high school athletes. And so if July 27th had been the date that we had started with tryouts and practices, then it would have been August 10th, would have been the first day of competitions for either preseason classics or regular season sports. Now that that's been pushed to August 24th, the earliest possible date that you could see a competition on the calendar is September 7th. And the FHSAA has indicated, while I don't, as far as I'm aware, they have not set an actual date and time in stone yet, but they have indicated a plan to reconvene their board of directors the week of August 10th. So somewhere between August 10th and 17th, that board of directors will meet again and will determine whether they are going to stick with these dates as the earliest possible dates, or whether they are going to make additional changes or cancellations, or if they're going to have any other policies or mandates as far as the way that particular sports are approached in the fall season. So that's where we are right now. And so, Neil, I want to bring you into the conversation because, of course, depending on your perspective, you could have a range of reactions to that. I think for a lot of people, it is a certain sense of relief that we have not taken fall sports off the table yet. But particularly for those who had grave concerns that, based on the case numbers that we're seeing in Orange County, that we were potentially not ready, even with all of the best mitigation protocols in place, to have this kind of unavoidable contact with student athletes and coaches, that we have a little bit more time now.
So, yeah, Mark, first off, it's good to be back here again. Of course, Mark and I, we've texted a few times during the last 4 months, just basically, asking if we were doing okay, which obviously we are. But I think the most important thing to be taken out of the news that broke today and what you were just explaining was that while the dates in terms of them being set in stone are still up in the air, there's no definitive dates as far as these. Everything you talked about was tentative, but we now have narrowed what was, we have no clue. When the pandemic struck in March, and basically the Department of Education here in Florida said everyone go to virtual school, we had no idea if there was going to be classes in the fall, if they were going to start in August or they were going to start in December, or even how they were going to be done. So I think now, at least the fact that we do have some actual dates, that's a certain comfort, a certain relief in terms of the fact that we do feel that there is some movement forward as far as knowing and being able to make plans, because we do know. Now, granted, again, they are tentative, so we don't know, they could change, but at least instead of looking at the situation from as broad a spectrum as possible, that we have no idea, we have no clue when anything's going to happen, the start of the school, never mind when athletics are going to start. We don't even know when the first day of the classes are. At least now it's a 3-4 week period. It's, a defined period. And to your point, just the fact that there is at least now some progress being made towards getting the athletic season started. Again, as you mentioned, conditioning is going on for football and swimming. So I think that's what's important there. And, as you mentioned too, one thing about high school sports that a lot of people probably don't give a lot of consideration to unless you're the person in this, but high school athletics don't just involve the players or even the coaches. Even it involves everybody at least in high school, involves everybody in the community, everybody from the administration, starting with Principal Baker Drayden, who, if you don't know, she is succeeding Miss Erickson. This will be her first year. Everybody there, from the principal all the way down to a substitute teacher like me, it does affect us, because maybe it doesn't directly affect us, but we've been sitting around, wondering, when's school going to start? And of course, if we don't work, we don't get paid. So, and then of course, football brings in so much money, and that ties into the whole revenue. So it doesn't just affect, the players or even the coaches. It affects the whole community, at least at the high school level.
Right, and I of course always want to avoid the cliche of making fall sports all about football, because we certainly don't
Right.
want to forget about cross country and bowling and golf and swimming, and all of the other activities that happen in the fall. But there are certainly, you can't deny, some unique considerations for football. And I know that our FHSAA board members, as well as our Orange County board members and administrators, are certainly sensitive to that. Obviously, you're not going to make safety and welfare decisions on the basis of money, but it is a cold reality of athletics that football pretty much funds the rest of athletic programs.
Yeah, that's where I was going again. Like you, I certainly, I cover all the sports you can pick up in the pocket, chief, and it. But we try to cover all the sports. But the reality is that football is what is generates revenue. And again, that is sports in general has a symbiotic relationship with any area or aspect when it comes at the high school level.
Right. And now the other thing about football that makes it a little bit unique among fall sports is that it is somewhat less flexible compared to other sports when it comes to scheduling, because games are traditionally played only once a week. Now, there are some exceptions to that. If there's a weather-related event, then maybe you can do a Monday and a Friday, but there's generally an expectation that you're going to have a minimum of 4 to 5 days between competitions, because it is simply brutally punishing on those student athletes, and they require that kind of rest and recovery time. Even at the professional level, that is no less true than it is at the high school level. And so, as a result of that, when you push back the start of the season, or I know there have been ideas floated about maybe even moving football into the spring season, but then there are problems with it crashing into other sports and the kind of domino effect that that has. That anything you do to the football calendar has these domino effects, because you're taking a season that only had 10 games in it to start off with, and now you've eliminated 4 of those weeks by pushing to August 24th. Assuming you keep the original calendar as far as the end dates. So then you got to figure out, okay, are we going to play until Christmas or beyond? Or can we maybe compress that by dropping the kickoff classics and by compressing the state championships into one weekend instead of 2? You can maybe buy back a couple of weeks that way. You could shorten the postseason potentially by eliminating a round of competition, although that raises equity concerns among competitiveness. So there's a lot of side effects, because football cannot absorb a shortening of its season in the way that other sports that are perfectly happy to play 2 or 3 times a week can. So again, the logistical concerns are always secondary. Health and safety always come first. But those are ideas that are, I know, swimming around in a lot of FHSAA administrators' heads right now, as well as county and school coaches as well. And I do want to point out that from Wekiva's perspective, to be perfectly clear, Neil and I are not in any way decision makers.
No.
We do not control any of these decisions. We don't have any input into these decisions. We just trust that they are being made with the utmost of care and consideration for all of the different factors that our county and state leaders have to deal with. That being said, we are trying to prepare for as many possibilities as we possibly can. For example, once we do return to play, will we be able to host fans in the physical fields and courts? And even if we are, how many of our fans will be comfortable taking advantage of that? Certainly, even if fans are permitted, we know that some of our fans may have high-risk considerations or may just not have that personal comfort level with going to a live sporting event, and we certainly respect that. So what can we do? So we, of course, have been live streaming for years now, and we get a little bit better at it every year, and we are prepared absolutely to do that again this year. with our full camera crew and with Neil and I, and making some adaptations to the way that we do it and the way we distance ourselves from each other and handle equipment, and the way that if I need to wear a plastic shield over my face with a headset that has a boom microphone on it, instead of a cloth mask, or things like that that we can adapt and still keep it safe. Or if we're not able to facilitate a full broadcast crew and like a camera crew, the FHSAA, in partnership with the National Federation of High School Sports Network, NFHS Network, has made an opportunity available where we can acquire something called a Pixelot. At no cost to the school, which is an amazing ability, and we can then mount those devices in both the football stadium and the basketball and volleyball court, and those are smart, high-tech cameras that have multiple lenses in them, and they will automatically follow the action. So, and it'll broadcast on the NFHS network with no intervention whatsoever from us. You just connect it to a computer, leave the computer on, and you go into the producer software and tell it when your game starts, and it automatically activates and starts broadcasting. And it can be completely without an operator. There can be nobody there to operate it whatsoever, and it still works. So we're looking into that as a possibility. And of course, if we do have fans, we're thinking about how we can do that safely, or we may not. So, and back to the earlier revenue point, if you have a football season but you don't have fans, well, then that kind of doesn't fix the revenue problem, because football is also the most expensive sport of any of the sports. And if you don't have revenue to offset that, it can really sink the athletic program's budget for the year. But again, that all is secondary. We think about solving for that after we solve for the health and safety, to be completely clear on that. So again, what we really wanted to provide in this video update is just, again, providing, even though there's still a lot of fluidity and a lot of things could change, we wanted to provide that information that we do know. And second to that, we wanted to reassure our fans that we miss you, and we hope you miss us, and we want to get back behind the microphone. I think it has been since early March that Neil and I sat together on a softball announcer stand, and I sang "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" for the last time. And then we had a volleyball game that night, and then that was it for the year. And
yeah,
we miss
that
it.
was, I believe that was March 12th. So
Yep.
it's actually been over 4 months.
Yep, and we miss it, and we want to get back to it as much as anybody does, but we also want to do it safely. And at this point, that's just not something that that our county and state officials are comfortable with yet, and that's completely understandable. So that's where those August dates come from. And Neil, I think to your point earlier, this provides maybe a little bit, while it may not be what some of our athletes hope to hear, particularly in the case of football. Again, I don't want to exclusively focus on football, but one of the other unique things about football is that high school games are really the only opportunity for these athletes to get in front of college coaches. Football doesn't really exist as a club sport. It's really all about the high school action, as opposed to other sports where there are other opportunities to get exposure for those who are pursuing athletic scholarships in college. And I know our athletes are very anxious to get back on the field and do what they love to do, and it's a wonderful positive experience for them, even for those who aren't going to go on to play at the next level. It really is. There's a lot of character built and a lot of lessons learned on the field and on the court that we certainly don't want to deprive our students of, but at the same time, it's a matter of balancing that with their health and safety. So I think at least having this preliminary information may put some minds at ease that we have not written off the season yet. And we have at least kind of an outline for the best case scenario of what could happen.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, best case scenario there. With that said, I think discretion is the better part of valor. This is actually, we've done 2 other podcasts, so we got a little bit more into it in our other 2, but suffice it to say, I think also when it comes to the high school level, you're dealing with a group of the population that isn't nearly as experienced as the older, and they might not I don't want to say they're not as aware. And again, if any of the athletes listen to this, I'm not trying to say this is negative or to say that um, the students aren't smart. But generally speaking, my observation as someone who spends a great deal of time at the high school, not just athletically but academically, as a substitute and a teacher, I spend a lot of time with non-athletes too. There's just not that awareness of hygiene as there might be, say, even 5 or 6 years later. And, I've also pointed this out on the other podcast that the Miami Marlins not only canceled their home opener tonight against the Orioles, but they are also staying in Philadelphia. They played the Phillies this weekend. And the last two, I said there were 12 players who were tested negative for COVID-19. I actually saw just a few minutes ago that is now actually 14. I'm not sure how long ago that 14 was, but I've seen the report. The point is that the number is going up. So if you look at it from the standpoint of, hey, this is a Major League Baseball team that has taken certain precautions, and they have the money to take certain specific precautions, and there's still a team that's getting 14 COVID-19 cases, and it's to the point that they feel that they can't travel back to the city they represent. It certainly can happen at the high school level. And to my point again about just not that awareness, you're dealing with in sports. It's not like if you're a student in a classroom where you can come in and just sit down at a desk for 15 minutes, open a book or pull out a notepad and start writing. You're not moving. In the locker room, you have to move. It's not like you go into the locker room and stay in front of your locker the whole time. Number one. Number two, locker rooms are very small, confined areas. So you're increasing that risk of you're going from there being a risk in a professional team to it probably being even more so at the high school level because it is a unique situation. In high school, you're not just dealing with the athletic side; you're dealing with the academic side as well as the athletic. And not only are you dealing with that in the sense that you're in more locations, but it's a different financial situation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that we have seen um, different reactions at different levels and in different parts of the country. We've seen how professional teams have reacted with the MLB and Major League Soccer and the NBA trying to make some decisions and the NFL. And we've seen at the college level some different decisions being made, some colleges or some conferences suspending their seasons entirely, others continuing on, and still others continuing on, but only in their own conference. We have seen some at the high school level. I believe the latest update is that California, District of Columbia, Nevada, New Mexico, Virginia, and Washington have all gone ahead and made the statement that they will not play football this fall. And then the rest of the state associations are somewhere in a situation similar to Florida, that they have either not made a change, or they're still working on it, or they have pushed the start of the season to be later at least, with possibly the option of making further decisions later. I also wanted to point out, because you mentioned, the other logistics when it comes to locker rooms and travel and other sorts of things like that. I want to put up an example. So if you take a look at this example, this is for volleyball, and this is something that the FHSAA put out that's based on a document that the NFHS put out. And there's one of these for each sport. So this one that you're looking at here is for volleyball, but they exist for football and cross country and everything else. And these are considerations that they're recommending that would minimize the risk that's associated with participating in that sport. So, for example, they have some changes, and these are all things that they don't materially impact the way the game is played. But as far as some of the administrative policies and procedures, they are recommending some changes that say, you know what, these rules that we normally have about the administration of the game are not really that important, and we can find a way to do them more safely. So when it comes to things like the pregame conference with the coaches and captains, there's a way to socially distance that. You don't have to do the coin toss. Um, you don't have to do roster submission live to the officials. You can submit that correspondence to the scorekeeper. There's a tradition in volleyball where you switch sides after every set because maybe one side of the court has an advantage that the other one doesn't. But the reality is, in modern high school facilities, that's not really true, and there is no material advantage almost all the time, unless maybe you've got awkwardly placed windows that put sun in your eyes or something like that. So they're saying, unless there's a material advantage to being on one side of the court versus the other, just stay where you are. Whatever side of the court you start on, play the whole match there. You don't need to switch. You don't need to do the pregame handshake. You don't need to do any of that. You can find another way to indicate your mutual sportsmanship toward each other. Making changes to the uniforms, allowing long sleeves and long pants, allowing the officials to use electronic whistles instead of ones that go in their mouths, allowing or encouraging athletes to come already dressed for the event so that they don't need to change in a locker room. That's, you can imagine, particularly for a sport like football, you can imagine that if we do get to playing football this year, that halftime is going to look very different, and they're probably not going to go inside the gym building for the locker rooms. They're probably going to have one team out on the hardtop basketball courts that are outdoors, and maybe put the other team on the practice field. And work through it that way. But there are certain adaptations that become very important in a situation like this. And then there are other logistics as well. I mean, I know that there has been some voicing of the point that certain sports can be done with maintaining social distancing, like cross country. As long as you do staggered starts, there really is no need for anybody to be on top of each other. And that's true, but there are still logistics that the county has to work through, like how are the athletes going to get to the events? So unless you put in a mandate that everyone has to provide their own transportation, then busing students to away games still becomes problematic, even if the sport itself does not require close physical contact. So there are a lot of logistics that have to be worked through, and I think that, in addition to seeing where the numbers go, is really what's driving these decisions to push the start date of fall sports. Again, though, I want to reiterate that while you and I, Neil, are not decision makers in any way, we are certainly sympathetic to the responsibility that's being placed on our leaders right now, that they know that these athletes want to get back on the field and that some of them may be depending on scholarships that are difficult to get if you can't actually demonstrate yourself playing the sport. Not to mention the fact that athletics, just as a general rule, provide a positive alternative for students to occupy their free time that otherwise might not be spent as constructively. And not referring to any of Wekiva's athletes specifically, but that's just a general point to make statewide. And all of those things are absolutely valid, and we want to get back to it. We want to get all of those benefits of athletic participation, but at the same time, that has to be balanced with health and safety and the ability to logistically deal with all of the considerations and transportation and adaptations that have to be made to the sport in order to play it logistically. And we just aren't in a position to do that today, because today was the day that athletics were supposed to start. And so it is the prudent thing to do, and we have to trust that our county and state leaders are doing their best to, to take the responsibility seriously and to make sure that they are advancing the best interests, both in terms of health and safety and in terms of all the benefits of co-curricular athletics. So again, this is the first time we've come to you with a live video since late in the second semester of last year, only because this is the first time we've really had new live information to share. The fact that school is now starting on August 10th is literally hot off the press. That was announced today. We actually, as soon as I finish this video, I'm going to go on the website and post the update, because it's actually not in writing on our website yet. But
about 3 hours ago.
Yes, so that is that's live and late breaking. And again, also to put on your radar that the next time we can expect an update, because again, all of these are best case scenario, earliest possible dates. The next time we can expect a more definitive update to this is going to be that week of August 10th, that the FHSAA will meet and will adopt whatever guidance they choose to adopt at the state level. And then we expect that Orange County shortly thereafter will issue their local guidance, um, which could be the same as the FHSAA guidance or could be more conservative based on the local circumstances here in Central Florida. So I know, Neil, that you are itching just like I am to get back behind a microphone again and to get back to writing about sports and putting that in the Apopka Chief and getting all that great coverage for our student athletes. And I feel like this at least gives us a blueprint for how it could happen, um, and still leaves us with a sense of comfort that we are not rushing into anything.
Yeah, and I know you've talked about this indirectly, but I think it's important just to use the word patient right now. We've talked quite a bit about that on the other podcasts. Again, I know it's become a cliche. We've heard it so much, but these truly are unprecedented times. Uh, and people are getting tired of hearing that because it really is the truth. Uh, I think the decision makers are doing the best they can, and I think so far they have done probably as good a job as one can expect, given that these are unprecedented times. I did point out in the other two podcasts that mistakes were made. There have been probably 5 or 6 what could be considered pandemics in the history of this country. Probably the most well-known now is the 1918 Spanish flu, and that was not taken seriously. And many, many people who got sick didn't need to, and even unfortunately, there were many, many people who actually died who didn't need to die. A number of those people had, they were young people, probably under the age of 30.
Yeah, and
Uh,
certainly we can also attribute a lot of new information that we have available to us now about understanding how
yeah,
diseases
that's
work and how they spread, and also a much improved ability to communicate with the general population that didn't exist in 1918 or in the handful of mass health events that have happened since then. But I want to get the board up one more time for those who may not have been with us at the beginning of the presentation. So I'm going to put that up now. That's just kind of a recap of this is where we are. So we, again, already in progress, and this is the update that we wanted to share with you. Football and swimming have conditioning that is in progress right now. And we anticipate that our other sports, especially knowing that they're going to be delayed getting started with full practices and tryouts, are going to start coming up with conditioning plans as well. And we'll share those with you on our website and our social media feeds as we have details. And you can also get our coach list on wekivamustangs.com so you can reach out to those individual head coaches. We also want to put in a sales pitch for the new online athletic clearance process, that if you haven't done that, go ahead and get that done so that you'll be ready to go if and when we are able to launch with tryouts and practices. And you have to do that anyway before you can participate in any conditioning. And so our head athletic trainer, Coach Hippolyte, is reviewing those as they come in and is continuing to approve those. Again, this just in, August 10th is now back to being the date that school starts, but even if you selected in-person instruction, you will not have that option on August 10th. If you selected in-person, then you'll default to launch it at home. And the other thing that I didn't mention earlier that I want to call out here is that Orange County has really encouraged families to take a close look at that launch at home option, because it is something that, if you remember the second half of the second semester, that was something that we were very much making it up as we went along, because we just didn't have a chance to put protocols in place to do virtual instruction the way that we really wanted to. And so if you felt like that was a little scattershot, know that this is not the same as that. Launch Ed at Home is something that we've now had the opportunity to really dig into and come up with the way to do it right. And so Launch Ed at Home, you stay enrolled at Wekiva or whatever school you belong to. You remain a student of that school, and it emulates the regular school day. So you'll start at the same time school starts, you'll go through your schedule, you will have face-to-face interaction with teachers, just not in the same room. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions in real time. It's what we call, to use the technical term, it's what we call synchronous learning as opposed to asynchronous learning, which is what we had at the end of last semester. So that means that it's real time. You have a real teacher who works at Wekiva and is either going to be teaching from their home or from their empty classroom. And again, it has that structure of the school day, which I know, Neil, you've mentioned before, not necessarily for everyone, but for many teenagers and younger students, really helps with the learning experience to have that structure built into the day as opposed to just being whenever you choose to do it. And the other thing that I think Orange County is really thinking of when they're encouraging people to look at Launch Ed, it minimizes the number of students that we actually have on campus. The more people who choose Launch Ed, that means that those who do eventually return to brick and mortar are able to distance themselves more, spread themselves out across more classrooms, across more teachers, and overall reduce the density of students on campus. And the other thing compared to Orange County Virtual School is that it keeps the funding and it keeps the teachers at Wekiva. Because the difference is if you go with Orange County Virtual School, you are withdrawing from Wekiva and you are no longer a student of Wekiva High School or of whatever school you are normally enrolled in. Now, that being said, there are ways, just like there always have been if you're a virtual school student, for you to register for athletics as a quote-unquote non-traditional student. There's some extra paperwork that you have to fill out to verify that you're not involved in any kind of recruiting and that you are normally zoned for Wekiva, or you're making an election under Florida law to participate in athletics at Wekiva. So there's a lot of extra paperwork that you have to go through, and it is not as seamless if you do eventually want to go back to the classroom, because then you have to re-enroll at Wekiva. So all of those things are doable, but the Launch Ed at Home option is certainly the more seamless experience because you remain a Wekiva student. You do not need any special paperwork that you would not normally have to complete anyway. And then when you are ready to return to the classroom and it's safe to do so, it's a very seamless transition at the end of the grading period. So that's why Orange County has really been promoting that. If you're kind of on the fence, certainly not trying to tell you that you're wrong if you are very much into the idea of virtual school, which is more like a correspondence school. And more like what you saw in the second half of the semester last year, or in-person instruction if you have particular requirements regarding who's at home and your individual learning needs, and you require that in-person instruction. Again, not telling you that you're wrong to choose the other options, but really promoting that Launch Ed at Home as being maybe the best of both worlds and the best compromise of getting the benefits of the structure of a school day and real interaction with your teacher versus against the risks involved with physical proximity. So that is the plan for August 10th. August 21st, again, is the earliest possible return to in-person classroom instruction for those who selected that option. Again, we're not, at this point, it is not apparent that anyone is going to be forced into in-person instruction at any point during the first semester. So if you didn't select that, if you selected Launch Ed at Home or virtual school, you're going to be able to continue to do that through the first semester. But for those who did choose that they desire or they need in-person instruction, August 21st is the first day that will possibly be available, although again, that is not a promise. Orange County is seeking the autonomy from the state to be able to exercise their discretion as we get closer to that date and determine if that is the best course of action or if it needs to be pushed further. And then again, based on what the FHSAA said earlier this month, based on their revised direction and based on what Orange County has said, August 24th is the earliest possible start of practices and tryouts. Again, that is not a promise. That is just the earliest possible date that the state will allow it. Once the state has an opportunity to meet on August 10th or the week of August 10th through 17th, then Orange County will review that guidance and make a decision for Orange County specifically, and we will promulgate that information as soon as we get it. But based on that August 24th date, that means that September 7th is the earliest possible start of competitions for fall sports, because you have to have that 2-week acclimatization period between the time you start practices and tryouts and the time you actually have a competition. So again, those are the message points that we wanted to make sure we got out there today. And we wanted to, I mean, obviously we'll post that in writing. We've already posted some of it in writing, some of that information we had before today, and some of it we just got a few hours ago. But we also wanted to get in front of you, and we know this is only one-way communication. We can't see you, but you can see us. But we miss you, and Neil and I are looking forward to the opportunity to bring you Wekiva Sports once again from somewhere other than our home offices.
So yeah, Mark, again, just feels good to be in front of a camera, even if it is the camera from our laptops here. And these are unprecedented times. Again, a lot of decisions which have never before had to be made, and we just urge you, most of all, just please be patient for that reason, and just know that at least from our part, the communication, or if you prefer broadcasting team here at Wekiva, we are just as we're going through the same as you are. And I'd also just like to bring up too, even though he's not on talent, Keith Dickinson. I've actually, again, just like with Mark, I haven't talked to him anything about broadcast, but I have just texted to him a couple times to, just say, how are you and your family doing? He actually just became a father within the last year, so that's certainly, he has a unique situation, being him and his wife being the parent of a newborn. So we're all, suffering the same, and we're all dealing with the same. And, I know, Mark, even though you don't directly make a living through sports, you have been involved, and sports has been a big part of your life. For all of us, we have spent the last 4 months waking up every morning just going, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do because there is no sports. For me, for those of you who don't know, I grew up in Detroit, which is a very sports crazy town. I played Little League Baseball. I played Bantam Hockey, which is the equivalent of Little League Baseball. At the age of 8, I was selected to play in the Oak Park All-Stars for both those sports, and they're basically club/travel. And I was playing those while I was going to school, like everyone else, elementary and the middle. And then I went to a high school, which was a boarding school in Ohio. And I continued to play hockey and baseball. And we did a lot of traveling. We traveled all over North America. Then I moved down here to Central Florida because I was offered a position with a newspaper which no longer exists, but I also enrolled in UCF. I got my bachelor's degree. I've been working in print journalism for 30 years, and I've spent the last 13 at the Apopka Chief. I was hired to cover Wekiva high school sports, specifically when the school opened. And last year, I enrolled in Full Sail. They have the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting, so I'm pursuing a bachelor's degree in sportscasting. So as you can see, my life has pretty much revolved in centered around sports since the earliest age. And I know anybody who's in this business, sports journalism, whether it's broadcasting, print, or any of the new forms of digital media and technology, it's the same. So again, we're going through the same thing. I wake up every day and just go, what am I supposed to do? For the first time since I was like 5 years old, sports is there's nothing to do in my life that involves me either playing or covering sports.
Yeah, I know we all miss it. You and I from the coverage perspective, and our athletes from their ability to get out there and play. and our fans for the ability to get out there and watch. But again, and for those of you who may not have watched the whole podcast here, feel free to rewind it and take a look. We've got those graphics up there that give all of the dates that we do know, or at least the earliest possible dates that we do know. And if you're watching this on replay a week later, then don't trust any of it because it might have all changed. Know that we are thinking of, we're brainstorming everything we can possibly think of once we do get that final direction from the state and the county of how we can facilitate this safely, how we can bring the action to you. And get that in front of you on our various social media channels, YouTube Live, NFHS Network. Anything we can possibly do within the realm of safety, we are going to continue to do, and we're thinking about all that, and we're thinking about you all as the athletes and the fans. And how this is impacting you as well. So it's good to be behind a microphone, even if it's not at an athletic venue, and we hope to get a chance to do that soon. Thanks for tuning in tonight. We hope that at some point we're broadcasting something that you want to see more than just Neil and I sitting behind a desk. And we look forward to that day. But in the meantime, as Neil mentioned before, it's really a matter of patience and flexibility as we look for a way forward here. We'll continue to update you as we know more. We'll put it on our at Wekiva Sports on Facebook and Twitter, and WekivaMustangs.com. We'll come back to you on this YouTube channel if we have another exciting update to share. But again, unless something dramatic changes that we're not expecting, the next really substantive update that we're expecting is probably going to follow that FHSAA meeting and the subsequent Orange County decision that week of August 10th through 17th, and we'll look for more information then. So thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks also to Neil Fisher from the Apopka Chief joining me tonight, as he has for the last 13 years and change. This will be season 14 once we do finally get it underway. My name is Mark Barchi, the voice of the Mustangs, wishing you a great night.